Hello, it's Bob Point here from Bob Point Paints this time. It's been a bit of a while again. I do apologise for that. But real life, etc. So, I've been discussing with one or two people a little bit of a project I've got on the go at the moment. And that is a speed painting challenge. Over the next 12 months, I'm hoping to paint, and this is madness, I appreciate, and may well not come to fruition, but I'm hoping to paint 12 Mantic Kings of War armies, mainly based around their mega army deals, which vary in points from 1,000 up to probably 15 or 1600 points, dependent on the options that you take with the figures that you're provided with. But yeah, I want to. It's a challenge. I like hobby challenges. It's a bit of a tricky one. It's not something I've ever tried before, painting that many armies in a year. But I certainly think I've got it in me, and even if I don't achieve it, I'll hopefully get some way down the line to achieve what it is that I want to do. And even if I paint 9 out of 12, that's not going to be a bad return. Part of that challenge will also include some speed army painting. I've been speaking to Andy at Blackjack Legacy. It came up really from a comment Andy made on one of his videos about having no time to paint. It's something that we all struggle from time to time, and certainly a Kings of War army is a bit of a task to take on. So, in fact, Ronnie's mentioned this before in one of his videos, and I think one or two others from Mantic have mentioned it, that it is a daunting task to paint a whole Kings of War army. And that's why Vanguard is such a great introductory game to get you in at the level where you need 12 to 15 figures maybe, which will get you started and then hopefully spur you on to getting at a full Kings of War army, because Kings of War is a great game, no doubt about that. I've always been a speed painter. I've been a base coat wash sort of a guy to a tabletop quality. I'm not embarrassed by the figures that I put on the table. I think they're okay from 3 feet, 4 feet. They don't stand up to much scrutiny at the end of your nose, but that's not where they're designed to be viewed from. They're designed to be viewed on the table. So that's always my mantra: paint it quick, get it on the table. Army painter paints that I use in the main, as well as some Citadel, some Vallejo, etc. That's been their whole USP within the hobby paint market, using the various dip methods or washes like strong tone here. The strong tone, dark tone, soft tone corresponds to their tins of oil-based dip, which I've used on countless thousands of historical miniatures over the years. Never really got around to using it on 28mm figures, mainly on 15mm and below. My results on the larger figures hasn't always been great. That's more down to my technique than anything else, but certainly using these bottles of strong tone, dark tone, soft tone, and they've actually got one or two others now. They've got the flesh tones, they've got some coloured tones, so red tone, blue tone, I think there's a purple tone, and I think there's a mid-brown tone now as well. They are really excellent, and for somebody who wants to get figures on the tabletop quickly, the Army Painter range is great. So for painting an army, really it's about 2 or 3 things. It's about organisation, being well organised in what you're doing, having all your kit, all the essentials that you need, your brushes, your water, your bits of tissue, your figures all in a nice space that you can work from. It's about having a bit of discipline. So for me, that's painting in assembly line style. So don't paint one figure, paint 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is. If the figure is wearing, if a group of figures are all wearing roughly the same uniform, so using the same colours, the same colour armour, the same roughly weapons, then get as many done as you can using the base coat and then the wash as possible, and you'll fly through. You really will. So yeah, organisation, discipline, and it's really one or two little techniques, I guess, to cut corners. Certainly using the washes is one of them, but there are one or two others that hopefully I'll go into at some point. I am not a display painter, a competent figure painter at all. These are methods that I could probably teach my 8-year-old to do. So the purpose of this video is really just to demonstrate that method on these Dwarven Crossbowmen. So these will form part of the Dwarven army that I've got on the go. More interestingly, in the discussion with Andy from Blackjack Legacy was about the concept of painting an army in a weekend. I think Army Painter have actually ran these sort of initiatives over their 10 or so years in business. I know that there's a Kings of War group out in the States that did something similar. And it was on the back of Andy saying he hadn't got the time to paint. So I thought, well, I'm pretty sure, given the time to do it, I could get a Kings of War army painted in a weekend, not to an incredible standard, but certainly to a presentable standard that I'd be happy to play with. Talking between 16 and 20 hours over the course of a weekend, so a long Saturday and then maybe a shorter Sunday, so, or even a Friday night for a few hours, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. It's a challenge really to see how much I can get done. Initially we talked about 1,000 points, and I was thinking, well, what about 1250? I'm at Ultibash 7 at the weekend, which is a 1250 point tournament. And then 1,500, 1,700, and ultimately 2,000 cropped into my mind. If the whole army is built, based on multi-bases using preferred model count. I want to avoid minimum model count if possible. So preferred model count on multi-bases, primed, based, ready to go. All the paints in front of me. Just how far could I get through those, through that army, whether it be 1,000 points, 1,500 points, or 2,000 points over the course of a weekend, using the techniques that I'm going to use. Yeah, so that's what the purpose of this video is really. I thought, well, I've got these crossbowmen, and as you can probably see, I've actually made a little bit of a start before I thought about doing this video. So I would say to this point, other than construction and spraying the figure with the Army Painter leather brown spray paint, which I'll use as the base coat, and then a very quick dry brush of a old gold colour that I've got here. It's actually a Vallejo colour, just called Old Gold. There it is. That's probably taken me 2 minutes to get the gold on these 4 figures. The unit will be a troop of crossbows with 7 figures on. I do have another 7 waiting to go, so that could be a regiment or 2 troops. I'm really not into list building or min-maxing or knowing what the benefits of a crossbow is over a dwarven rifle. I just want to get the figures done. I like the figures, so that's what the army will be. The whole aim, actually, and I've not discussed this really with anybody, is to put on a multiple 1,000 point multiplayer game, ideally at a Mantic Open Day, whether that's the spring one next year or the November one. I've not discussed this with Mantic. I really ought to. but it would look like something along the lines of 12,000 points a side, maybe a little bit more. Considering I've really only got an undead army painted to this point. Yeah, that's 24,000 points minus probably 2,500, so it's certainly over 20,000 points of figures to paint in a year. Yeah, it sounds mad, sounds impossible, may well be impossible. I don't know if I can do it, but that's the aim. Anyway, so the purpose of this video is to paint these figures as quickly as I can. The time on my watch at the moment is 10:05, and we're at the 10-minute 44 point of the video. So I'm just going to crack on and very quickly paint these. Now, I was talking about one or two little cheats. Let's go start. One or two little cheats. One of them is, if you make a mistake, don't sweat it. Don't go back and correct it at this point, at the point where you've made the mistake. I think that can slow people down. People get a little bit worried about, oh, I've missed that little bit of corner of an armour, or that beard has... I painted that beard and it spilled over onto some cloth. I think when you're getting these first colours onto a figure, you can be pretty much as rough as you want, within reason, clearly. This gold will actually get a wash of the strong tone, and then a very light dry brush with a mix of silver and gold, just to make it look like a really old sort of gold with a little bit of contrast. But yeah, I honestly think that people do get rather hung up on getting the colours right, and to a certain extent painting miniature figures is a bit like painting by numbers, but the more you stress over getting the paint in the exact right place and getting perfect coverage, the slower... I've just made a mistake on the cloak of this crossbowman. A little bit of the red has actually gone onto the gold. I'm not going to sweat that. That will be corrected in time, if need be, actually, because of the washes that will eventually go onto this figure. It sits into the creases and does get really well hidden once the wash dries. And obviously using a brown undercoat is a real good godsend, because your gloves are done, your belts are done, to a certain extent the beards are done, because most beards are brown. I probably will just give it a little bit of a dry brush with something at some point, but let's just see how quickly I can get through these figures, because Top Table Legacy Weekender at Element Games is middle of October. I just forget the date now. We'll put a little bit of a link up to it when that comes back to me. But the idea is to have a couple of practice runs where I probably won't get the time to sit down for 2 whole days or 2.5 days to sit, or a Friday evening and a weekend to practice doing the army painting. But I can certainly count the hours that it takes me to paint the army, and to get somewhere around that 16 to 20 hour mark, which is what I think I'll have over the weekend, and hopefully will be what I need. It'd be lovely to actually get a gaming with the army on this Sunday afternoon, for instance. I know Andy was pretty keen on that idea about painting up 1,000 points and getting it on the table on the Sunday. That would be amazing. But I don't want to sort of stretch myself or push myself or think to myself, I've got to get these done because somebody's waiting to play me. on the Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning. For me, it's about getting this army done and finished over the course of a weekend. Now, whether I get 1,000 points or 1,500 points or even 2,000 points, obviously dependent on model count. I think elite armies, as opposed to horde armies, are going to be a different kettle of fish. Obviously, you'll get far fewer models in a 2,000 point army if it's an elite army, such as an elven army or even dwarves maybe, than you will in an orc or goblin army, where the model costs for the units is that much lower. But for me, it's about proving to people, not just Andy. This isn't about proving anything to Andy. Andy knows, you know, he experiences the same stresses on life that we all do, and I've suffered in the past. It's about proving to those naysayers that say, I could never paint a full army. I haven't got the time. I don't know how to do it. It's impossible. And it's really saying a little bit of discipline. And in fact, this is a point Andy made at the Mantic Open Day, which I'll talk about shortly, on Saturday, was that if I do this within, say, 16 hours, let's say I put 16 hours of work in over the course of the weekend, 2 8-hour days, or a couple of hours on the Friday night, a few hours Saturday, a few hours Sunday, and paint the army within the 16 hours, then you really, that breaks down to 1 hour a night for 16 nights, or 2 hours a night for 8 nights. And if you think, I'll put in an hour a night for 16 nights, Monday to Friday, having the weekend off, 3 weeks later, you'll have an army on the tabletop that's painted. Now, again, not a Crystal Brush winner, Golden Demon winner. It's not going to win an award for best painted army. Well, mine won't. Yours might do, I guess, if this is something that you go into and you're already competent at. But that isn't the idea. The idea, as I said, is to get an army on the table as quickly as possible, and getting it painted, because painted armies are the best armies, obviously. Okay, so that was all of the red has gone on to the these troops. They're basically going to be all red, which saves time as well, and that is a consideration, actual colour choice, palette choice. Once you've decided to paint the army, the next thing is obviously to come up with some sort of colour scheme. Sorry if I'm going off camera there a little bit. So this is a fur brown that I'm using. There we go. The light might be a bit glary there, but the brown undercoat, the leather brown undercoat that I used, is a perfect base coat for these sort of armies, because as I say, the essentially gloves and beards and boots even really are already coloured in. So I'm just sort of picking out bits and pieces on these crossbows, not being too precise about it or precious. I am also doing the scabbard on the back, and the pouch for those figures that have got a bit of a pouch. Not being precious about it, just absolutely throwing the paint on, to be honest. So the gloves, boots and beard for the moment will remain in the leather brown colour. These figures, I've noticed I've not actually done the knee pads on these guys in the gold. I'll need to rectify that shortly, and that's one of those things where rather than stopping my flow as I'm painting these crossbows, and going back and getting the gold out, finding which figures I've messed up on, and doing that, and then coming back to the crossbows when I'm halfway through doing these 7 figures being enough for a troop, preferred model count. That sort of thing does slow you down. I'd like to think that people will look at the army and think, oh, it's alright actually, rather than thinking, crikey, looks like it's thrown the paint on from 10 feet away. That isn't the aim. I still want a presentable army, and I say it's really about 10. I've been painting figures since, crikey, I'm 48 now. Probably really got into painting armies and such when I was 20. I guess I was a student at the time. I just joined the Stoke War Games Club. So that's crossbows done. I just joined the Stoke War Games Club, and I was painting historical figures because that's what I'd got into, because the people I was introduced to, they were playing historical games. I'm just here doing a little bit of variety on the beards. What are we, about 10 past at the moment? So going all right. The thing that will happen here is actually, and just to sort of add the caveat before it happens, is that these will get a wash. Now, when I'm doing the army challenge, if I do these stages, so the red cloaks, the crossbows, the armour, on the whole army at once, and then come to the stage where I need to wash, I'll wash the whole army at once. By the time I finish washing it, the first units will be dry, and I'll be able to do the 1 or 2 extra bits and pieces that are needed to finish the army off. Whereas tonight, obviously, just trying to whiz through these guys as quickly as possible, and I'm going to have to factor some drying time in to the finished product. I've completely lost my train of thought there. Sorry about that, guys. So the beard's done there. That's actually not the flesh I want. Go for this rather suntanned flesh colour from Foundry. Brushes as well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? The amount of brushes people use. I use very limited numbers of brushes. Keep doing that, sorry. I'm not precious again about making sure that I've got a number 1 brush, a 0 brush, or whatever it is, to get to the nooks and crannies. I find a good point is far better than a brush with 5 hairs on it. You can't beat a good point, and that's not a pun on my name. Absolutely not. So there we go. So Mantic Open Day has been and gone. My goodness, that was a really good day. So gutted about the news this morning that the offices have been broken into and cash and laptops been stolen. That is really bad news. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, Mantic Open Day was great. Met a load of people that I've come to know over the last few months since I've been on this real Mantic kick. Some really good people. Such an accepting community, welcoming and inviting. I can't speak highly enough of the community. Excuse me. Apologies for that break in proceedings, I'd having talked about being disciplined and organised, I'd left one of my paints off the table. So this is the skeleton bone. It's going to be just used for the rope of the crossbow, and just throw it on there. There's no rocket science involved here. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of painting tutorials that you can go to for advice and techniques that are on the are on YouTube, and a lot of those are really high-end painting tutorials. This isn't really a painting tutorial, let's face it. This is me just having a little bit of a splat of paint on these 7 dwarves to see how fast we can get these to the point where I can get a wash onto them and say, yeah, they are tabletop ready. They are suitable to fight in a game. So these aren't really far off now, to be honest, believe it or not. The washes make an absolute difference. They are probably the hugest, the most impactful development within miniature painting gaming in, well, forever, I suspect. Incredible influence that guy there with no skin. Could have a darker skinned dwarf, I guess. It's just meant that anybody can get an army painted to a standard that really can be classed as not far off a notch above tabletop standard. My problem is I get to this stage and I think, well, I could just do this or I could just do that, but I've got to, it's that discipline to say no, just stick to the program. I'm just adding this extra little bit of gold here to the armour that I've missed at the front. Actually, it's the belt buckle, the knee pads, and the scabbard of the dagger that these marvellous dwarves are wearing. I've got a little bit of silver I need to add in, but I'm going to be washing these fairly soon, just to show you how quick it is to get it on. It's the painting style, I guess, could be called almost abstract, in the sense that you're suggesting colour and depth and contrast and all those other arty-farty phrases that you can use, but you're not really pushing it much further than that, to be honest. On the tabletop, at the distance at which you'll view these figures, the colours will tend to sort of fade away and disappear, and sort of merge into one, unless you've got pretty good contrast on them. Just touching up the crossbows here where the metal bits would be. Again, I've really not been too precise about it. The wash will hide a multitude of sins. This guy's going to have a silver belt buckle. For some reason I've ignored his knee pads. Yeah, the the wash will hide a multitude of sins when seen from gaming distance. Now, for the armies that I'll be painting over the course of the next 12 months, which I do hope to document on here, the foot troops, the vast majority of figures, therefore, will be a base coat and wash and done, the vast majority. Maybe one or two bits and pieces of some of the other of the foot troops that will get some extra attention, dependent on how big they are or how much detail there is on the figure. But the vast majority will just be this, what I'm doing now, essentially, this base coat, this suggestion of colour, or the silver belt buckle there that was missed, doesn't matter too much. And then the characters, the leaders, the specialists, the mages and princes and paladins, etc. They will get one layer of highlight initially, and then dependent on time I may add in a bit extra. I don't know. As I say, I am entering, this is a leap into the unknown. I'm entering the unknown within my abilities to speed paint. I've always known that I am a quick painter. I've painted 15mm historical armies within a day, practically, without too much trouble. Now I'm just wondering whether or not if I could put a little dry brush onto the gold of these now and then wash. Well, I'll tell you what time are we? Can't quite see. 32, so I've been about 22 minutes on these 7 figures so far, so that's about 3 minutes a figure so far. That's not bad, is it? Let's just, this is the trial, so I'm just going to actually mix gold and silver together here just to get that really old gold look. Having talked about planning preparation again, I'm finding myself rooting around for what I need, but I'm just going to it's not quite where I need it. I've now got a little bit of brown in there inadvertently off another colour, but anyway, okay, nobody's going to criticise that. So there we go. There's probably not quite enough contrast on that. I suspect that when I come to wash these, I may have to do this again. I think it's probably a process that needs to be done after on completion of the wash. So here we go. That's, I don't know, I really don't know what you can see and what you can't see there, but it's really just a quick, it's almost a wet brush actually. It's wrong to say a dry brush. There's a fair bit of paint on the brush there. I'm not actually wiping it off, as you can see, but it's a dry brush technique, just throwing that paint on there. And do you know what, from where I'm sitting now, which is probably 2 feet away from the figure, they look all right. They look all right. And once they're based, so this is now going to, this is now going to get liberally thrown across the figure using a pretty largish brush. This is actually a Wargame monster brush from Army Painter. I really don't care about where I get my brushes from. The Army Painter brushes are absolutely fine by me. Some people criticise them, but do you know what? Some people will criticise just about anything. They'll say that black is white, white is black, up is down, down is up, to try and make a point. So I don't know how well you can see these, but that really is all I've done to this figure, I've just thrown that paint on there. 7 figures. I'm just going to get a little bit of water to add in to this Army Painter strong tone, and I am just going to lather this all over them. And you'll think, oh my god, Bob, what on earth are you doing? But you know, let's just see what the end result is. I have done 1 or 2 test figures already of the dwarves, just to get the sort of colours down that I wanted to do, and on those I actually did go back and just put 1 highlight on the red, because I'm putting essentially a very dark brown wash over red. Now that works pretty well. Red is on the sort of brown side of the spectrum. You wouldn't, I don't think you'd use this wash if the figures were blue, for instance. I think you'd use a black, or indeed a very dark blue. And in fact, as I've said, Army Painters do a red wash, but I would have to get a separate paint out to do that. And the Army Painter method, using the oil-based dip, is really just to throw the whole wash of brown or black over the figure, and if you're not happy with it, just sort of go in and add that extra highlight, just to brighten it up, because there is no shadow of a doubt that this does dull these figures down to the point where it takes away any vibrancy that the colours might have. But I hope you can see that I'm really, you know, my 8-year-old girl could be doing this for me. In fact, that might be an idea for the completion of the 12 armies in a year challenge, because she could earn some daddy brownie points by doing this. I've got to have a strong suspicion I'm going to get it through 2 or 3 bottles of this stuff, because they aren't bottomless bottles. I'm getting in a little bit of a state there. Excuse me one moment. Apologies for that interruption again there. The wash had started to reactivate some of the paint underneath on the old palette that I was using, so over to new palette. One of the advantages of enjoying Chinese food is you get these containers with the kung po chicken in, or whatever it is that's your delicacy, and they are fantastic to use as palettes. Don't go to an art shop and buy an artist palette. Not if you're this sort of painter. If you're a Golden Demon winner or such, you might want to use something a bit more professional. But you know, this is about make do and mend, I guess. Just I really am a gamer more than a modeler or painter. I enjoy playing the games more, but the irony of that is that you spend far more time doing this than you do on the bit of the hobby that you love. I do actually enjoy painting. I'm not saying that it's not something I don't that it's something I don't enjoy, but it can get to be a chore. You can get overwhelmed by the amount of work in front of you, particularly if you're like me and have dozens of different projects on the go at the same time. But we all find our own way, I guess, is the right. They've all been washed now. I've wasted quite a bit of strong toning there, unfortunately. I've got nothing else to throw it on, so that wasn't great. But come the big day, that I'll be washing the entire army like that. So I'm not going to be able to do any more for the purposes of this video, because I've got drying time now. I may do a little follow-up just to show you what's going to happen to these guys. As you can see, they look a little bit rough and ready. If I bring it right up, there's a camera there, it probably won't focus. Clearly it's still wet. And you might think that is an abortion. But hey, these are my figures. So here, not sure if that'll focus. Here they look pretty shocking. Take it back to here, and you think, well, it still looks a little bit dark. Down to here, where you can see these guys, you can probably see a little bit of red, a little bit of gold, a little bit of brown, and think they look like Mantic Dwarven Crossbow men, which is what they are, and that's what they're supposed to look like. That's taken me, what, it's 41 minutes into the video now. I started at about 10 minutes into the video. It's taken me about half an hour with a bit of messing around there, so 7 figures in 30 minutes. I do think that once I've got into the swing of the plan for the day, which is to have the whole army multi-based, primed, ready to go with all the paints that I'll need without having to go and root around in the paint box behind me, and clean water and plenty of kitchen towel. That's 3.5 minutes, if that, per figure. That'll come down. I don't think it's impossible. I may have to go without lunch. I may have to eat through a lunch, or have food brought to me at the table. But I reckon I can do it. Yeah, smoke and mirrors. That's the answer.